Okay, this is this is a fun part where I get to talk about all sorts of interesting stuff. But first, disclaimer: there's all kinds of different electrical wires at different voltages. So I might be reducing this to more. This might be what I'm trying to say is this might be an oversimplification. But question: here it is. A bird lands on a high voltage power line. Does it instantly get zapped and fried? Let's say there's maybe 1,000 volts going through this line. That's enough to, 120 volts is enough to really hurt your hand or zap you if you're messing with your outlet. But here's where we have to remember that voltage is not just a potential, but a potential difference. So if this is a high potential wire, we can assume that that same potential exists pretty much in every place along the wire. If this wire is losing potential from one place to the next, that's only a couple feet away, the electric company has a significant problem that it has to deal with because that is a lot of voltage loss in the line. Remember that voltage drop is current times resistance. These wires are made to be very low resistance. That's their job, is to have very little resistance. So your resistance here in this patch of the wire is pretty close to zero. So the voltage drop, or the potential difference, is going to be very close to zero. So between the feet of that bird, there's pretty much no voltage. But now say a big raccoon were to come up and try to eat the bird, and it were to like walk from one wire to the other. If this was, say, a neutral wire over here at zero potential, and this was a high potential wire, now there is a large potential difference between one part of the raccoon and the other. That's going to drive a lot of current through the raccoon, and it's going to have some problems. Okay, now let's say there's a storm and the line breaks, and you have a high voltage line on the ground. Now you happen to be nearby. What do you want to do? Should you straddle your legs and put your feet as far from each other as possible? Or should you hop up and down on one foot, or just stand on one foot? Let's think about it. So right here on the ground you have very high potential, and far enough away on the ground in another place you're going to have zero potential. So the voltage is dropping as you go farther and farther from that hot line. So voltage drop is current times resistance. The ground has the resistance here. There's going to be some current going into or from the ground. And the ground's resistance is probably going to be high enough that a lot of potential drops over a very short distance, such that the potential right here is probably a lot higher than the potential right here. So if you were to take one foot and put it here, and the other foot and put it there, there would be a high potential difference between your feet, a high voltage between your feet. Voltage is electrical pressure. That's going to push current from the one point to another, and that current's going to go through your legs. It would help if you were wearing thick rubber shoes, but I have actually, when messing with a Van de Graaff sphere, I have seen current arc around the bottoms of my shoes. So the moral of this story is to put your feet as close together as possible, or just stand on one foot, because if you're just have contact with one point of high potential and no contact with another grounded point or another point at lower potential, you should be fine. Alright, new story. This is an electrical outlet. This is a hot side. This is the neutral side. And this right here is the set of tweezers that I stuck into an outlet when I was 2 or 3 years old. I know I did this because I remember doing it. And I remember thinking, I probably shouldn't be doing this. But these tweezers are just the perfect size and shape to really want to go into an outlet. And it just seems like it should go in because it fits so well. Now when they go in, there's definitely 120 volts of difference between this side here and this side here. And they are very low resistance, being metal, so a lot of current is going to go through them. There I am. I'm on my parents' counter. I'm on the their sink countertop area in their bedroom bathroom, and we'll call that ground. Now you may say, oh, well, this is not good for me because there is a 120 volt difference between here and the ground, and current would go through me to get to the ground. And what I have previously explained about this, which I now come to doubt a lot, is that the current didn't go through me because it had a much lower resistance path to ground just through the tweezers. But that's not really the whole story, is it? I mean, there's still a big voltage difference between right here and the ground. So it's like two parallel parts of a circuit here. We could draw this situation as a parallel circuit. Here's the small resistance of the tweezer. Here's the bigger resistance of me. But just because I have a bigger resistance doesn't mean there's not a big voltage drop between my hand and my foot. It's the same voltage drop that the tweezer experiences, and this is, ground. But actually, is it? It's a little more complicated than that. It's not exactly the same voltage, right? So let's assume I'm just holding the very tip of the end of the tweezers, and half of the tweezers are on one side and half are on the other side. And we know the total voltage drop through the whole tweezers is 120. Again, think, there's current, there's some resistance in the tweezers. The voltage drop is IR on one side and the other side if these sides are equivalent. So, it makes sense that, if half the tweezers are over here, you got half of your voltage drop happening before you get to my hand, and then half of the voltage drop happening after. So you might only, I might have only had a 60 volt difference between my hand and my foot, which still should have shocked me, but I didn't really experience any shock. And I've been advised by Daniel Edwards at Patrick Henry Community College that what probably happened was, obviously there was a ton of current that went right through the tweezers, and that, tripped the breaker before I could really get zapped. So mostly it was the fact that the current just, boom, went right through the tweezers. That's what saved me. But because it tripped the circuit breaker. Now, if you do something like, say this was, you only had one side here. Say maybe somebody sticks a coat hanger in the hot part of their outlet. That they might be a little worse off than I was, because then the only path to ground would be through the person. Let's look at another example where the only path to ground is through a person. This is the ground. It's also the electrical ground. If you are holding a ladder, and this actually has happened to people. If you're holding a ladder and they did not, these people actually did not make it through this experience. But yeah, you're holding a ladder and you lean it against, or just even touch it to a hot high potential wire, you now have created a circuit between the high potential wire through the ladder through you to ground, which is zero potential, and a lot of current goes through you, and it's not good. And it might, depending on how you're holding the ladder, that current might go through your heart, which is what kills you if it stops your heart. And this is why electricians are supposed to put one hand behind their back, so that they can't create a circuit from one hand to the other hand, which would send current right through their heart. So they'd rather have current go between their fingers, or from their hand to down their leg or something like that, rather than through their heart between their arms. I knew this to be the case when I was moving roofing panels, and I noticed I almost did this same darn thing with roofing panels. I almost touched roofing panels to a live wire. And this makes me think of another time that I almost did something disastrous. A cord is actually two cords. You got the hot wire and the neutral wire. A circuit involves having current go one way and come back in a loop. And if you have a nail or something, if maybe this is a wire in your wall, and you hammer a nail in to hang up a picture, that nail might touch both wires, and that's not too good, because now, instead of going through the resistance associated with whatever this cord is running, the current just goes, oh, here, cross over, okay, and right back without hitting pretty much any resistance at all. And that's a short circuit. And I've heard stories of people drilling into a wall and then going pow when they hit a wire. So one time I was drilling a hole through the wire to put a Cat5 cable through, and I did it down by the baseboard where I figured there'd be no wiring, and I was doing it with a plug-in electrical drill, and the radio was on and the refrigerator was on, and halfway getting through the hole with drilling, everything turned off and the drill stopped working, and I was like, oh crap, I actually probably hit a wire. But when I cut open the wall, there was no wire in there. And what it turns out had happened is that whatever electrician had done the wiring, and the electrician who used the wire nuts to put the wires together and connect different wires did not do so very securely. I actually opened the switch box, and here the little wire nut has screw threads inside. You get a few wires connected in there. You twist the thing. It twists them all together, clamps it down pretty tight. The wire nut that they used had a maximum capacity of 6 wires, but they had put 9 wires in there, and one of them had kind of come out and it was loose and was kind of just sitting out. And what had happened, I think, is that when I started using the drill, it pulled a lot more current on the circuit than had really ever been pulled on it before, and it was enough to arc current between the metal part of the wire nut and the wire that was kind of dangling there. And it actually, I could see that it had created enough heat to melt the wire nut. So loose connections are actually a big hazard because of the threat of arcing. You're not supposed to backstab your outlets because of that. There's more of a chance they'll come loose. And now for a story where a wire did get short-circuited, but it wasn't me that did it. It was our chickens. We had a heat lamp in our chicken coop, which I now know that you don't need to do that here for chickens. But they had scratched through the housing of the wire, and the two different wires, the hot and neutral, just touched each other. They connected. For some reason, it did not blow our fuse, or it didn't trip our breaker. And A ton of current went through the extension cord that went out to the chicken coop. The extension cord was in our yard. It melted into our yard. It set our brown zoysia grass on fire, and literally our yard burned down. There was a circle of fire emanating from the chicken coop. The chickens were all fine and didn't go in the chicken coop. Actually, our roommate's friend came up to us and he said, "Is your yard supposed to be on fire?" And we were like, "Uh-oh, let's get out there and put it out." And we, dumped water on it. We stomped on it. And, this zoysia grass, it turns brown in the winter and it burns pretty well. And we were unsuccessful, using watering cans and boots to put out the fire. And we were trying to block the fire from going to the woods on one side and the house on the other side. And I finally went and got a fire extinguisher, and it just barely made it around the ring of fire before running out of carbon dioxide.